Hello, everybody, and welcome to this evening about sex work and the future of sex work in Amsterdam. My name is Levi, and I will be your moderator for the evening. I'm an artist, and I'm a sex worker for over 10 years. And with other people, we wrote a text. That shows that we think should make the future for sex workers better. Who are we? Well, we are a group made out of sex workers or ex-sex workers who see things change a lot for us and our colleagues in Amsterdam. For example, one very hot topic is the erotic center. The idea to build new workspaces is a very good idea, but it leaves a lot of sex workers who will not find a space there kind of out in the cold, because it doesn't fit the way they work, for example. Also, the erotic center will close down windows in the red light district, which we are against, because a lot of people from the red light district like working there. And the most important thing is now, in these times, that there's a community of sex workers and a community feeling between them. That is why it's important for us that we have also the support of 8 sex work and ally organizations. These organizations are the SWAT, Ugly Mugs, SAFE, the Sekswerk Meld- en Adviespunt, Papaya Queer, Trans United, the Prostitution Information Center PIC, and Sekswerk Expertise. They also gave their opinion on the manifesto and are behind it. The manifesto itself was written by sex workers and ex-sex workers, speaking with different kinds of other sex workers. There was a lot of consultation happening before the text came about. Some people work behind a window, some do escort, some work from home, some do porn, or any other form of sex work. More than 50 people were consulted, more than 50 sex workers were consulted to write this text. And after writing the text, different focus groups were consulted of sex workers for the opinion of the text, and they could also give some more input and change things. These focus groups, were from cis women, cis men, trans women, trans men, non-binary people, any gender you can imagine, basically, and they all do sex work, and they all have been part of writing this text. I will give a little introduction about the background of the text now, and then my sweet colleague, kind of colleague, I don't know, Richard will tell you about the text itself. You also all have it. It's too dark to read it now, I think. But Richard is going to take you through it. Because sex work has been a part of Amsterdam since the 13th century. Yes, that's 1200 something. And still, sex workers today face stigma, exclusion, and unequal treatment. Many are denied basic rights like safety, healthcare, and financial services, all due to stigma. And despite the fact that sex workers embody the values that Amsterdam prides itself on, barmhartig, heldhaftig, en vastberaden, or compassionate, courageous, and determined, sex workers are often sidelined by harmful laws and societal bias. Those with intersecting marginalizations, like certain gender, sexualities, physical or mental disabilities, or migrant status, face even greater barriers. Many of the laws and regulations that politicians invent and want to implement do not always empower sex workers. As a result, legal and licensed sex work is made more difficult, causing many sex workers, like myself, to end up in the margins of society. This makes them more vulnerable for abuse. This manifesto demands change. It is time to turn the tide and let the sex workers' voice be heard in Amsterdam's policy during the upcoming municipal elections. I'm missing my page. So this is a little bit of intro to the manifesto. I would like to invite Richard on stage to introduce yourself and tell us about the text.
Thanks, Levi. I think we can say we're colleagues. As Levi said, this has been put together with a lot of input from a huge group of sex workers. And I had a very teeny tiny little part to do with it. So it's a huge honor to be able to take you through the manifesto. Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm Richard. I'm the chairman of the sounding board group for male sex workers at the Amsterdam Centre for Sex Workers. So top of the manifesto is more legal workspaces. We need more legal workspaces in Amsterdam, and how do we do this? Well, we want to designate more areas with a prostitutiebestemming. Why do we want to do that? Because in order to open a sex business, there has to be this in the public order bestemmingsplan. And at the moment, when places close, they turn into sweet shops or whatever in the center, and the licenses are lost and the bestemming plan is changed. So we need more prostitutiebestemming because it will make it easier for more spaces to open. It will increase sex workers' bargaining power, and it will also lower prices. Next point is make these spaces meet the needs of all sex workers, and this is radically important. At the moment in Amsterdam, there is a complete lack of licensed workspaces for particular groups of sex workers. A few months ago, when Boys Club closed down, the only club that provided space for male sex workers to work, that now means that there is absolutely no single space in the entire city dedicated for male sex workers to use. And although efforts have been made to make pace cameras available to hire by the hour by a more diverse group of sex workers, because of the regulatory structures, that's taking a really, really long time to bring in, and we're still waiting for that. So right at this moment, there really is no space for LGBT sex workers, older sex workers, disabled sex workers, or marginalized sex workers in general. And we want that to change. Next up is diversity in business and organization of sex work. So we want diversity. At the moment, there is very little diversity in the sex industry in Amsterdam. And how can we bring that? Through innovation, through new ideas and new perspectives. We need new blood and new people and new ideas to be able to open spaces, to be able to create new kinds of business which fit the way that sex work is happening and changing, and how sex work will be in the future. This is not going to happen through over-regulation and over-control. It's not going to happen through rules and regulations that only fit a very specific kind of sex work, which is... Oh, sorry, am I holding the microphone too close to my face? This is not going to happen through regulations that fit a very specific kind of sex work, which is window work, because sex work is way, way more diverse than this. And it's time for the gemeente to take a crucial responsibility in the role of diversifying the sex industry in the city. The sex industry is incredibly highly regulated compared to other industries, and so through this regulation and through policy, I really believe that we really believe that the city can make a significant change in the diversity of sex businesses and the range of sex businesses that are in Amsterdam, and we are open to those discussions and want to make that change together. We also want more flexibility and freedom within the Walla, in the red light. More flexibility. What an amazing, simple idea. How about giving sex workers the option to choose how many hours and days they want to work? Very simple. Finally in this section, allow working at home and in a rented room. I love the city of Amsterdam, and it saddens me to say that it needs to follow the lead of cities that have got it right. How strange to say that backwards Amsterdam needs to get with the times and follow the example of Utrecht, Tilburg and Hilversum, and allow sex workers to work legally and safely where they want to, at home or in a rented room. So next slide. More rights and a stronger voice. We want Amsterdam to stop advocating for the forced registration of individuals. We want Amsterdam to stand strongly against the forced registration of individual sex workers, which is the proposed national policy. It's not an effective tool in fighting abuse. It leads to more criminalization of sex workers. It violates sex workers' privacy, and it will increase the amount of sex workers working without licenses. Our next point, include hygiene supplies and access to showers. Again, a pretty simple demand, but we think that sex workers should be able to access simple hygiene basics and showers in the places where they work. Access to contracts, retirement, and social security. Sex workers should be able to choose for their futures. And we want the city to research how labor contracts with access to social security and retirement could be possible for sex workers. And a sanctuary city, protecting undocumented sex workers. Undocumented sex workers are particularly vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. There must be a complete stop to the passing of migration information from the police to the END. Undocumented sex workers should not fear deportation or being detained simply for reporting an abusive client or an exploitative pimp. Finally, a budget for self-organization. We have to realize that the policy and the climate in Amsterdam also has a big impact on the isolation that sex workers feel. It's extremely atomizing, and it makes it difficult to form networks, work with people, etc. So there should be a additional budget that is about community building, is about addressing needs that sex workers have, and can bring the community together so that sex workers have a stronger voice to represent themselves. Yeah, next, more safety. So abuse is very often connected to housing vulnerability. Sex workers need housing, and we understand also that the housing crisis is terrible for everyone, but sex workers need priority access to social housing as a matter of survival, especially if they want to stop sex work or leave violent situations. And finally, training for 24/7 emergency services. There must be more training and dialogue between sex workers and the police. And actually, we were just talking about this earlier, but because of police shortages, there's often police that are brought in for other places to do police work in Amsterdam. And this puts sex workers at specifically at risk. We want to ask that sex workers have an active role in training emergency services, and that there are specialized teams trained by sex workers, and that there is a budget that's there to make this possible. We want also to have social and health services that are available 24 hours a day. Sex work happens all day and all night, and sometimes you can't wait till the morning. So this is incredibly important to improve sex workers' safety. Thank you. And that is our manifesto. It's in much more detail in the document, but yeah, thank you so much. And then now we have the Q&A, and I will pass the microphone to Lyle. And Lyle and Elle will take you through the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was a great presentation. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We, of course, also want to have a question and ask. And who's better when we're writing a manifesto to the Amsterdam politicians to also speak to the Amsterdam politicians and hear out what they think about it. I will be doing this Q&A together with my colleague Elle. Elle wants to remain anonymous, but Elle will be asking questions as well. And for now, I want to invite all the politicians on the stage. And please come and sit next to me. Thank you. So thank you for coming. We also invited D66, but sadly they could not attend. That's no problem because I organized and negotiated a private meeting with the program council from D66. Thank you so much for being here. Maybe let me start on my right. Maybe the first question, and this is going to be a question for all of you, is first of all, present yourself, but also if you look at the manifesto, what is a point that you really want to bring back to your party or maybe into the municipal council? So let me start to my right.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Doreen Balout from Amsterdam bijeen. And well, our stance as a political party, I think it's pretty clear. We've always been advocating for safe working environment, safety, basically work conditions like everybody else. This is the oldest profession in the book. So why does it take so long to get normal work conditions?
And you're also in the Stadsdeel Commissie, right? In
yes.
the city, sub-city council, I don't know how to call it. Is there something that you can do there in that position to take some of the points from the manifesto forward?
I think if we're talking about creating spaces, that would be an option. Seeing where more places for sex workers would fit in the bestemmingsplan. Yeah, those are options.
Okay, that's very nice. It's also the point that has most things under it. More safe workspaces, absolutely a priority. Lian, you are the leader of the PvdA, the Labour Party here in the city of Amsterdam. If you look at the manifesto, what is something that you really want to take back home to the municipal council?
Well, actually, two things I think are very important. One is the workplaces for LGBTQ people, because we know, and actually also for male sex workers, we know there's a large shortage in the city. This is something we often also discuss, also with the mayor, who also sees this problem. So I think it's important that we look at that aspect. I have to say my party is not necessarily in favor of adding more workplaces in the red light district or not lowering them when we have the erotic center. So there's a little bit of difference in what the manifesto says and what my party's current position is on that. And the other thing I think is really important is the last part, obviously, about the safety. And I think especially taking the perspective of the sex workers into how you create safer work environments and in general, hearing the people who these policies are about themselves, actively speaking and actively being involved in designing the policies. I think those are very important things.
So the budget for the self-organization we have in the pocket.
Well, I can't promise any budget-related things right now. Obviously, then I never like to promise anything before the negotiations happen. But I think the principle behind it is key. So I think, and obviously there are many ways to do something like that, but I think it's something in general in the city that we can do better, that when we make policies for people, that we actually involve the people that are affected by those policies more actively. So.
Thank you. Also, thank you for your honesty about the erotic center and the windows. There will be a follow-up question on that, I'm very sure. But before that, I want to talk to you, Imane, from the leader from GroenLinks in the City Council. Yes. If you look at the manifesto, what is your main priority, or what do you really want to take home?
Well, one of the... Is it working? Yeah. Yep. So one of the points is about undocumented sex workers. Yep. I think it's very important that their safety is ensured. It doesn't matter what kind of papers you have a right to safety. And I think that's very important. And the idea that if something violently would happen to you and then your information would be sent to END, that would be terrible. And it doesn't even matter what the crime is. You should be able to go to the police safely, no matter your papers. So yeah, that's very important for us as Greens.
Yeah, no, that's also really important for us. And maybe we can organize a conversation with some undocumented sex workers who have been going through some situations and see what we can do about that.
Yeah.
Okay, then we have also the party leader from Volt. Thank you so much for coming, Juliette. The same question for you.
Yeah, is it? I'm also going to check if it's working. Yeah, it's working. I don't want to repeat things that are already been said. Of course, definitely the safety is very important for us. What Imano was also saying when it comes to sharing information with the IND, we're not in favor of that in any way for any undocumented person. So definitely also not for sex workers. Also looking at the bestemmingsplannen. I don't really know the English word for that.
No, me neither. That's why we wrote in the Dutch.
We're do a switch from
public
English
urban
to
planning laws.
Urban planning laws, yeah. Definitely to see how we can create better workspaces as well. But also when it comes to, which is also national policy, of course, but really looking into how we can make within the national parliament, sex work is work. And it has to be seen as that, and not only here in Amsterdam, but everywhere. So my party is definitely in favor of also tackling that on a national level. But I think it's good that we also voice it out here in Amsterdam.
Thank you so much. I do want to give the stage to my colleague Anne right now for the follow-up questions.
Yeah, great. Hi, Mel. Thank you so much again for coming and for taking the time and to go through the manifesto. And it's really great to hear already you're thinking about some of the points on it. Indeed, I have a follow-up question about the red light district and the erotic center. So perhaps a current coalition member would like to respond, and then perhaps an opposition member would be great. So the current coalition has decided that when if an erotic center will open, that windows will close. But many window workers in the red light district still want to stay working there. Recently, over 200 window workers signed a letter saying they don't want windows to close in order to build an erotic center. And this is why one of our manifesto points says to maintain the current amount of window workspaces. So we're curious, what are you willing to do to protect the remaining window workspaces?
And sorry, do I understand the question correctly that you're also against the erotic center in general, or
we're against having to close windows in order to build new workspaces?
Okay. But not against the erotic center if it wouldn't mean closing.
No, we're always in favor of more workspaces for sex workers.
Okay. No, that's good to understand. Yeah.
Because you started about it.
Sure. Because I think maybe it's good to also one of the reasons why the erotic center also was ever sort of thought of by the mayor or proposed as one of the solutions was also because of the amount of tourists that we have in the red light district currently, and the amount of pressure that puts on both the people that work there, but also on the people that live there. So that was actually already now, well, probably, you were already in the city 8 years ago that this discussion started, I think.
2019.
6 years. So, and that's when the discussion started, and the idea of the erotic center came up, and it actually ended up getting a majority of votes because it could be a solution for several problems. And also one of the things, like in the manifesto, is the fact that there aren't enough workplaces for instance, LGBT or male sex workers. So the idea for the erotic center was that you could create a new area for sex work to take place that would decrease some of the sort of touristic pressure on the red light district area, and that would be in place of the workspaces there. But you could, in the design, think about it a lot more creatively, because obviously the red light district is super old, one of the oldest areas for sex work to take place. That has benefits, obviously, but it also has downsides. And the idea behind the erotic center is that you create a new kind of area, and that in that design you can think about many different aspects. So I read something here also about the love hotels. I think that's also a concept that was now in the proposal for the erotic center. So there are several ways that you can do that, but also to get basically the political majority also to build that erotic center. This was kind of a trade-off that you would decrease the amount of windows in the red light district, so that hopefully the touristic pressure would go down as well. And there's a lot of discussion, obviously, about it, also in the city council very often, but also, not too long ago, we had a meeting where a lot of sex workers also came to our city council meeting and told us what they thought about it. So it's an ongoing discussion, but in all honesty, my party is in favor of closing windows, but only if enough workplaces also are in the erotic center. So we're not in favor of decreasing the total amount of workplaces in the city.
Thank you for your response. Maybe somebody from the opposition?
Yeah, I would love to respond. We were, to be honest, in the current form of the erotic center, we're against the idea because there's also the idea of closing workspaces in the Wallen. My party is looking, because of what Lian also said, is like when it comes to the busyness, when it comes to tourism, we were asking certain questions about can you move certain spaces to maybe other parts of Amsterdam? But however, the answer to that is no. So for us, that means no erotic center when windows are going to be closed for my party. That's the honest answer.
Thank you for that. I'd like to turn it back to Lyle.
Unless you also want to...
Yeah, I can respond too. Yeah, my party was also against the erotic center for the same reasons, also for the reason that sex workers themselves were not in favor of the erotic center. I think also the reasons behind wanting to close the windows, it's not the sex workers' fault that the amount of tourists is so incredibly high in Amsterdam, and so now they have to suffer from trying to control that.
Yeah, in that sense, it seems like an easy. Sorry to.
Go. We are in the discussion, so feel free.
Great. In that sense, it seems like an easy way out to blame one certain group for the busyness in the city. Yeah.
Yeah, but if I can correct that, nobody is blaming anything, but it's a fact that the red light district attracts that many tourists because of the combination of what you can find there. So this is something that has been researched many times, and that obviously all the tourists that go there also explain that they go there to see what is happening, and it's so exciting, and you can see it yourself if you walk there in the weekends. It's families, and they all just look and stare and take photos. So I think it's a bit too simplified to say that the idea of the erotic center is to blame a certain group, but it is an idea to move sex work. I mean, it's basically like any other work that you ultimately move because the city planning is different. It's like what we do in the north as well, that we have a lot of shipyards had there in the past, and now there's housing. I mean, this is something that is ongoing in a city that's in development. So I think it's a bit unfair to say that it's blaming a certain group. It's also looking at where in a city you want to change something so that, for instance, with this touristic pressure is now very much unevenly divided over the whole city. So this is something where we're looking at. And it's not like we're only, the erotic center is the only thing we're doing there. We're closing the bars earlier, we're closing all the coffee shops earlier. So a lot of things are happening there to relieve the pressure on that specific area of the city and to make it less attractive for tourists to go there. So there's a whole range of measures being taken. And the erotic center obviously is the most obvious one and the one that gets most attention because a lot of people know about it. And it's very sort of clear what it is about. So it gets spoken about a lot, but it's, I think, unfair to say that that's the only thing we're doing in that city, because for the city centre in general, there's, I think, 88 measures being taken right now to
it's a long list.
So it's not the only thing we're doing.
So I'm really sorry. I know we need to continue but it was a direct response to me, so I quickly want to say something about it, because I think also when it comes to the word blaming, it's also, we're doing this debate in English now, so I'm also finding the right word. So it was might have been a bit harsh, but I think it is very obvious that we're seeing a problem here, and the group of sex workers were the first one that were paying the price. And I think that is the honest answer when it comes to these kind of policies.
What I also, I'm sorry, because what I really like about the manifesto, I feel in the discussion about sex work in Amsterdam, this whole erotic center, also because of the reactions and because it's a big, important project, but it has taken so much space that we could not always discuss the other aspects of sex work. So I want to take us also a little bit to there, because one of the points in the manifesto is also the issue of homework. And many sex workers in Amsterdam, because there's not always legal workspaces where they can go, they receive clients at home. However, this is not legal in Amsterdam. And this is, of course, something that in the city regulations we could change. I'm going to ask, I think, all of you, because we still have some time, but I also know that you have worked, or we have discussed it. So maybe you can give us a political update. Where are we?
So from tourism back to sex work, I think it's very important that we have different kind of workspaces for sex workers, because sex work has changed. For example, the upcoming of OnlyFans and different kind of sex work that's now possible. So that means our policy needs to change. We've proposed this, I think, less than a year ago. So right now we're looking into what's happening in Utrecht, in Tilburg, in Hilversum, and trying to learn lessons from what is happening there. At the same time, we also see a lot of issues, because we've seen that people that own buildings have that in their contracts. So there's no possibility, for example, for webcam work or OnlyFans work. And so you have now this issue that even if there was policy as a city, you cannot force these owners to say, well, you have to allow this. So that's something that we're looking into it legally. And I know the mayor has sent a letter about this, that she's currently looking into it, because in Amsterdam, the situation is different. At the same time, I think we need more legal workspaces, because I think it's naive to think that all sex work is in the red light district. That is not a fact. Let's be honest. And right now, the numbers are from, I'm not sure, I think from 3,000 to 5,000 sex workers here in Amsterdam. So, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So it's very important to make sure that everyone has a safe place to work. So I really hope that we can make some steps in the upcoming years, especially with everything involving in the other cities.
Just maybe a small follow-up question, because my impression always was, when it comes, for example, to social housing and the contracts and the things that are written there, it is written in these contracts because the municipality also has these rules. Or do you think it's the other way around?
I think it's
like
mostly,
if the city rules would change, do you think that would give some space to housing corporations or to Vereniging van Eigenaren to change their rules?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to look into currently what's happening in the other cities, but also in other countries. Yeah. Because when we look at the legalization of prostitution in other countries, we see that safety goes up, there's more transparency, it's better for sex workers to access healthcare or any other kind of support. So I really think we need to make steps forward if we want to ensure the safety of sex work. And that means looking into this as well. Yeah.
Maybe also to the right of me, if one of the two of you want to react. How do you look at homework, and what issues do you see, or what opportunities do you see?
Well, we already had the right to work from home in our previous program for the elections as bijeen. Yeah, and I agree with Imane that if it increases safety, it increases opportunities. I think also it's not. Can
I ask why would it increase safety?
Because people do it. If it's not illegal from your house, you don't have to fear that you're going to be expelled from your house if detected, and then you'll be in the street. And I think also, if it's you in your house, of course there is dangers might be involved. But if it's known that you're doing that there, and then maybe if you have opportunities to also report to the police or whatever, then and you feel safe to report, that would increase safety. It would also decrease the need to go to people's houses where it's not safe. Yeah.
And how do you feel about it?
Yeah, well, I'm asking about safety because one of the concerns that the mayor at least has is about the safety. So how do you remain in control, and how do you know what is happening when there's less sort of ways to check that, and because also we don't have the capacity in the city to go and check all the people that have the permits if they are indeed working voluntarily and in a safe space, sort of in a safe environment where if something bad would happen, they could call the police. So it's quite difficult to check that. So that's a hesitation for me, because I think ultimately people should be working in a safe space, no matter where you work. So I take that concern quite seriously that the mayor expressed previously, but like Iman said, I know that they're looking into it now. So I think taking that into account when evaluating also what is happening in other cities, for me is a priority. Yeah.
And you say hesitation, but do I taste a little opening there as well? What if we sit together with the mayor and come up with a plan?
Yeah. This is for me. This is. This should be the top. Like, obviously, if it is guaranteed to be, and maybe nothing in life can actually be guaranteed to be fully safe, but I think it's important to keep it in mind and to take seriously that there isn't always enough capacity also on the side of the city to sort of do checks and check if everything is going in a correct way or working in a correct way. So I think, for me, this would be key to know that these guarantees are there and then to discuss it further. But previously, when we discussed the homework, this was still a concern I then had. So.
Yeah, we are familiar with it, with the conversations that we also have with the municipality. Maybe Volt, it's an important issue for sex workers, so if you want to react also.
Yeah, for sure. You know what the thing is, it already happens. But now unsafe. Like now it's because it's illegal, it's unsafe. And then when something happens, you don't dare to go to the police or you don't dare to report it because it's an illegal activity right now. So I think it can definitely be safer to make it legal. I do think as a municipality, you need to make sure that you can also protect people when it goes wrong. So in that sense, we also in the last debate really asked about it. Like, can we speed these things up? Why do we need to wait for Tilburg and Hilversum, like already was said, as Amsterdam?
We love speed.
Your words. I'm gonna leave those words to you. Anyway, but yeah, we did ask, can't we speed these things up? And then the mayor said, let's wait for these pilots in these other cities to see if we can actually make sure that we can also help people when it gets unsafe. And I think that is a really important part. So in that sense, I hope we can work a little bit faster, but making sure that you can ensure the safety of sex workers is really important. So if the mayor says we need to wait for that, then we wait.
I have a next question from my colleague.
Yes, because we've been talking a lot about safety. I also want to point out that in talking about safety for checks, this hasn't always been a safe measure, actually, for sex workers, that it's led to people losing their housing, and it's also led to people's documents being taken, and it's been quite a traumatic experience. So that's something we would also like to revisit, making this actually safer for sex workers. But I want to go back to housing again, because it's, again, important for all sex workers and all Amsterdammers and everybody who lives in the city. And there's a lot of discrimination against sex workers in housing, especially against migrant and trans sex workers who are especially affected by this. So we just wanted to ask you, what can you do? Can you think with us to how to provide safe housing for sex workers, especially for those who are the most marginalized? I don't know who would like to start. Well, yes, thank you.
So to be honest, there's a housing crisis. Yeah. So it's very difficult to have like groups to get a house here in Amsterdam. The waiting list is years and years and years. At the same time, what is being said in this manifesto and how I've read it and also the stories I've heard is if you're in a very dangerous situation, you need to be able to get out. And those are different rules. So it doesn't actually really matter whether it's when it comes to like violence at home or another very dangerous situation or sex work. If you're in a dangerous situation, it's very important that you always have access to the municipality and police so they can help you also looking into housing, because we've all heard the horrible stories, of course. because sometimes it can get dangerous. And sex workers, especially when it comes to trans sex workers, can come in these life-threatening situations. So it's very important that people know that they have access to the municipality, to the police, if they're ever in this situation, and to contact us immediately if there is an issue with safety. And at the same time, when it comes to housing in general and social housing, currently we're not having new groups added because the lists are so long. We're not even able to assist the people that currently now have like an urgency or anything when it comes to social housing, and it's terrible. It's terrifying because there are a lot of people in unsafe situations, and housing could be the answer. And at the same time, we're right now currently in a housing crisis.
Thank you.
Maybe if I can ask a tiny follow-up question, but it can also be to some of the other councillors. We, of course, have the Amsterdam Center of Sekswerk. I think many of you have been there. I know that if there's a really, really big urgency, somebody that's actually in a very dangerous situation, maybe somebody is in a situation of trafficking, for example, and the landlord is part of the abuse, let's say, there is 3 or 4 houses, I don't know the exact amount, but that they can refer to take people in an emergency situation. Would you see any chances, for example, of expanding that amount so that more people in need? So I'm not talking about priority for all the sex workers, but maybe to look at how we can expand those emergency housing for really bad cases.
So and maybe from my understanding, is it currently so that that there's more demand for these security places? Or
it's always good to have the people from the center to speak, but I would say there is, and let's say there is. Would there be space with the city to look to expand that?
Well, I think in general, relating to what Iman just said, that obviously we have already rules when people are in very dangerous situations, and especially something like trafficking. There's also even national laws, obviously, that protect people that are trafficked. Also, when it comes to migrants, then there's a different regulation, you probably know, but that you can sort of appeal to get the support and the help that you need. So I think in these very extreme circumstances, there are already national laws that protect people. And if there is indeed a higher demand for these safe spaces, I think this is something that we need to look into. But I do have to say, like Iman also said, with the housing crisis, I mean, we currently have children that are living, in a container is that an English word as well? But it's horrible. The situation in Amsterdam really is horrible for a lot of people who live in difficult situations. So it's also it would be great to say yes, let's go add more spaces, because obviously we need to keep people safe. But we also have to be honest that we are in a very difficult situation. So it's a balance we need to keep. But I do see it as a priority that we look into safe spaces for people that are in extreme circumstances. Yes.
Al, do you want to do any follow-up questions? No? I think we actually have some space for the audience also to ask us some questions. We're going to do that later, but is that okay?
I can ask a different
question. Of course. Yeah.
If we have the time, thanks.
My colleagues go first.
Yeah, because we've already talked a lot about working from home. We've talked about the windows, the erotic center, but sex workers are so diverse. We have such different preferred ways of working as well. So just curious how your parties feel about thinking beyond the red light district, beyond the erotic center, into creating even more licensed workspaces.
Well, absolutely, because like Juliette said, sex work exists, but right now it exists in spaces where it's not safe or legal. And what we're trying to do is making that gap smaller. So it's very important that we have more legal, safe spaces to do the work. And I think that's very important. When it comes to sex work is work. So it's very important that we as a government and as political parties take our responsibility. It doesn't even matter what you think about sex work. You still have the responsibility for everyone in this country and for us in this city to make sure that they can do their job safely. So when we say more legal working spaces, what we're actually saying is decreasing illegal working spaces. And I think that's what we should be moving towards too.
Thank you.
Any other people that want to respond?
Yeah, I would love to follow up on that, and then we come to the word the bestemmingsplannen again.
Yes.
the urban planning, because I read that you are looking at the bestemmingsplan bestemming prostitutie.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, can we make it sex work instead of prostitutie?
Yeah. We wouldn't mind. Yes, it's a good idea.
And then I think second of all, I think it's very interesting, and I'm not sure if there are cities right now that are piloting this or trying this out, but I think it will be very interesting to look how we can make that possible, because I think this specifically is very difficult, but you can look into that when you look into it a bit more creatively, that you label some forms of sex work as the same thing you label like physiotherapy. Because some forms of sex work, if you look into that, then you can make it easier in a bestemmingsplan, and then you can create safer places as well and legal places as well. So I think there's definitely a lot that we can research. I'm very happy that you put it in there, and my party is definitely going to look into that. So thank you.
Thank you. Would any of you like to respond as well?
Yeah, I can say something about it. I think, well, there's some good ideas here in the manifesto, like the love hotels, these kind of places. I think also it's centralizing everything in one spot, like the wallet is one, and then you would have the erotic center. I think there's too much diversity to have everything in one place. And it's probably also, we've seen how much resistance there is in the different parts of the city against having an erotic center. I think it will also maybe take the stigma away a little bit if you make it not so large scale, but on a smaller scale, and sort of divide it a little bit more over the city.
Yeah.
Maybe that's also a question because the city has looked, I think, also into the option, right, of having the smaller locations spread out. What was the reason why they didn't go with that and they went with one centralized place?
The main reason is the police saying they can't guarantee safety. Then this was the main reason for the mayor not to
choose this option.
To pursue this further. And I think, but also looking into, or the question actually posed, I think it's interesting also to, when you say there's such a big diversity, like in the manifesto it's written there, I think there's also an opportunity if the plans of the erotic center move forward. And I know there's resistance, but it's also a new area where you can create something new. And I think if they listen closely enough to what is needed, then this could also be an opportunity to do things right and to do things in a different way. Because we have never done something like that before. It's completely new. I think this is also why in a lot of neighborhoods, like you mentioned, there is resistance. Well, this is also because people always fear something that they don't know and that is new. We see this with many different, well, basically anything that's new coming into a neighborhood, people resist it, whether that's a hotel or an asylum seeker center or now the erotic center. So this is quite common, but I think also it could provide an opportunity. And if it's in the end completely impossible and nobody would work there, I think this would also, we're now in the process of developing that erotic center. If this would be something that came out of that, then it would actually be really difficult because the city is also not paying for the erotic center. So it needs to be a viable business model as well. But I think these are interesting and important things to keep in mind. But also, I would like to invite people with knowledge on the topic to also think along when the city council or city municipality, not the city council, we don't do that ourselves, but are further developing these plans for the erotic center to include that.
No, I know there's many people in the room who have been part of participation trajectories, and also some people who decided not to, but there's plenty of opportunities to have our voices heard and how it should look like. I want to, first of all, I want to give a round of applause for all the municipal councillors, because we invited almost all political parties, and you took the effort on your Friday evening. And I would have you had alternative things to do, others of you as well. But thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Also, my apologies because I didn't tell you it was going to be in English, so I surprised you with that. I'm sorry for that. But I thought it would be maybe nice to take one question from the audience, and afterward we go to the next part of our program. But maybe just one question from the audience to our municipal councillors. Yeah.
Hi. Do you have sex in your bedrooms at home? I'm a dominatrix of 7 years, and I love role reversal. So I was just thinking, you know, how would you like it if instead of the police or some social worker coming into your bedroom, because I presume you have sex in your bedroom, maybe you go somewhere else, and they were knocking on your door. At the end of the day, all sex is an exchange, whether it's for money or for pleasure or for a new washing machine or for a marriage, you know? And we came knocking on your door and asked you, is everything safe in there? Did you take your PrEP? Did you wear a condom? I'm just curious because I think this is actually the level of invasiveness it feels for the municipality to be prying into our lives, you know? And instead of actually saying, look, we're going to try to make sure that the voices are heard of the sex workers. You could, you know, instead of building an erotic center, we have a public housing crisis. Instead of making other sex spaces, what if you made public housing or housing for sex workers or something like this, you know? So I don't know if I'm asking a question or making a point, but maybe the both. Like
a spicy question.
Yeah, spicy question, because it's true. It's true. Most people have sex, and they might, you know, there's no reason why we should be telling, like, sex workers are probably the people who know sex the best, and we don't need people coming into our houses or our workspaces to tell us how to do it. And if something were to happen to us, I have this power and fury of 1,000 whores behind me. I don't need the police. Like, you don't want to mess around with dominatrixes. We can,
no.
We can physically and psychologically do many things to you that you do not want, you know. And I think that's important to keep in mind when you're going through with this. Thank you.
I think maybe one.
Very much. I think we have no. I'm afraid we don't have any time for another question now before we sign or possibly sign the what's it called? Declaration of intent. As I think you have all received the text already beforehand, it's here in Dutch. I will also tell you in English what it is. What is written there is, I assure you that I will bring the content of the Sex Worker Manifesto to my party, and that my party will consult sex workers when decisions about them will be made. And please, for the politicians here, of course, you are not. It's not mandatory to sign. It's always compulsory. If you don't agree with anything in declaration, you don't have to sign it. Another important thing is that signing this does not mean you take over all the points in the manifesto directly into your plans for your new policies. They are kind of separate. What is written here is that at least you will bring it to your party's attention, and that you will ask for our as sex workers voices. If you feel comfortable, then I have a marker here.
Yeah.
And you can put your name and party on the board, and we'll be very happy with that.
But can I just ask a clarifying question? Because in the Dutch it says bring it into the policy of the party, and it implies that I personally decide what goes into the party policy. But there's a whole committee. We have a democratic party. There's a lot of voting going into it. So this is not something I can do, and therefore I don't feel comfortable saying that yes, I commit to that because I'm part of a democratic party. So for me, the language is really important. So if it's about an intention saying, yes, there's currently a party working on the new party program for the next elections, and I will take this to them and tell them to speak to you about the paragraph for sex works, then yes, I'm very comfortable with it. But saying, yes, firstly, I don't agree with everything, for instance, about the windows, but also saying, yes, I commit to this. And then, when the elections are coming, you're saying, hey, why isn't this in the program? So for me, this is important to clarify because...
That's why I clarified just now that it doesn't mean you take the exact text and copy-paste it into your policy, because we understand that will be very, very difficult, if not impossible for you as a person.
Yeah, or if not what the party wants. So
of
that's
course,
also...
Of course,
yeah.
no, that's why we make this clear distinction between this text and what we mean on
So the
paper.
intent is to take the text to the people now working on our party program. This is okay.
Yes,
Then
and that would be great if I could hand the mark to someone. But-
Hear me, Ben.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'll just start here.
Oh.
Oh, it is being filmed for 2 more minutes. So everybody has such a long signature. I did not expect this. I was like,
Mine's
text
like,
and done. But
oh, let me not. Okay.
okay, thank you very much, everybody. And I would like to ask the people on the stage here if there's any closing remarks that you want to make. You have about 1 minute. Not per person, total.
Oh, total. 15
3 words.
seconds.
Is there anything you want to end this with?
Yeah, I'll just very quickly. I think what we started with is sex work is work. And when I read the word prostitution, I was like, okay, we really need to change that to sex work. My party is also working on an initiative to change this in the policies from the gemeente as well, to really change that word, because sex work is work and we need to treat it as that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to say that sex workers have always been part of our party. Our previous leader of our party in Amsterdam was a sex worker, and most of the points here in the manifesto was already in our program. So to us, it comes natural to involve people who it involves in our policies.
Very short last words from...
Yeah, well, just thank you. And let's keep the conversation going, because I think it's key to hear sex workers when policies for sex workers are being made.
Well, I am so grateful for all the voices of sex workers here in Amsterdam, also the Amsterdam Center for Sex Workers. I don't see you right now because it's very dark, but I am so grateful for the work that you do, because that makes it possible for me as a politician to do my job correctly. And I think that is very important.
So thank you, everybody. Almost exactly on time. I'm going to stand in front of you all. I'm sorry, it's a bit disrespectful, but whatever. I have to stay here. So thank you for the viewers at home. Really great that you watched. And yeah, if you want to stay in touch with the program, I think the information will be on the website of PIC Amsterdam. And then we here will continue with some more questions from the audience. And afterwards, drinks. You all got a little coin. That's your drink coin.
We had in mind to have maybe 30 more minutes max of some questions from the audience. We already got a little spicy question there, but I think, I think the underlying question is an important one that was also raised in the discussions that we had when we were writing the manifesto, and it is about police raids, right? That can sometimes happen. So maybe we can also reflect a little bit about that, because I know this is an issue that has been troubling our community, and it's also related, for example, to housework not being legal, and then the authorities, of course, sometimes wanting to check what's going on behind closed doors, but this is also the living space and the workspace of sex workers. So is there somebody who would like to say something about that?
Well, we've talked about this in the municipality because there were several cases. It's because you said I was actually occupied today. It's my husband's birthday, so I really had to laugh. Your joke.
Oh, wow.
He's out. He's
the party.
At home. No, but we've talked about it because there have been invasions that were absolutely not inclusive and very terrifying for sex workers. And because there isn't policy in place, these situations happen. So I know, like, we've all advocated to make sure that these things cannot happen this way, because it leads to situations, what you said about papers, about housing. It's very extreme. So for now, I know that the municipality has changed the policy on this, but if there are cases right now from the last couple of months, because this was, I think, half a year ago that we discussed this, I'm not sure. I would love to know, because that's unacceptable. We need to ensure the safety of sex workers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And can you be more precise? What exactly has changed in the policy?
Well, what happened was there were home invasions with the police, but there was not, like, you have this somewhere written about that the police should be more, here, the last one. That anyone should be more specialized on sex work, and that didn't happen during those home invasions. And that's something that was also in the report. So it's very important for us to be aware of that if that happens again, so we can make sure that we talk about it also in the city council to make sure that this doesn't happen, especially when it comes to point 12 about making sure that when you work with sex workers from a safety point of view, it's very important to understand the world of sex workers. And that's something that we need to work on. That's why I talked about the Amsterdam Center for Sex Workers, because they're so important, especially for this part.
Yeah.
You agree? Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I also think, like, for the police, I mean, if I build a dakkapel in my house without a permit, there's no police raid coming into my house. So the actions of the police should be in balance with whether there is a crime committed, yes or no, and then also to see who's the criminal and maybe who's the victim.
Yeah. No, that sounds very reasonable. When we were asking for questions, I saw Marianne. You had your hand. Just wait for the microphone, please.
Hi. Well, I just wanted to add, especially to the Council of the PvdA, when it comes to safety, it's exactly these razzias, these politia razzias, that make it very unsafe for sex workers to work home-based, and that make that you can't go to the police if something is going wrong. And I'm always a little bit surprised about the idea of it being unsafe if sex workers would work independently, not surveyed by the police or not surveyed by an exploitant, because it feels like sex workers are children that need to be surveyed. And if I think about safety, at this moment, marriage is a much more unsafe place for women to be than sex work. I don't know of any murder on sex workers this last year. There is one woman in 10 days that is murdered by a partner, an ex-partner, or a rejected partner. And I know a lot of sex workers, and most sex workers I know are more resilient than most female civil servants I know. So I think we have to start from the idea that sex workers are adult people. And they need the same rights.
But maybe, but maybe to interrupt, because I also don't think it's fair to speak about women who are being murdered by their partner as not being resilient, because this has nothing to do with being resilient. This has to do with violence from those partners. So I think I don't like this analogy that you're making, or this comparison, like if it's because women are weak that they are being murdered, it's because the partners are violent. I think we need to keep in mind, and I think this is also why it's obviously in the manifesto, that sex work can be unsafe. I'm not saying it's always unsafe, but it can be unsafe. And I think this is important. Obviously, but that's also a key priority here in Amsterdam, that we're looking at this murdering of spouses. So this is something that is very key in our priorities. It's not like we're ignoring the other violence that is there. But I also think it's not fair to say that sex work, that there's no risk to it, when always when it's being spoken about, the risks are there even in this manifesto. So I think it's just important that we take care of that and that you keep it in mind, because not everybody is resilient and not everybody who does sex work does it voluntarily.
And just to bring it back to the first part of Marianne's question, that if homework, for example, is illegal, that it's not always comfortable for sex workers if they're facing abusive situation, but they're working from home to go and report to the police that they are struggling with security situation, right? Because they might be afraid that then they will be declared illegal or... So this idea of illegality, that it sometimes creates barriers for sex workers to go to the people where they need to go to get help.
But this is something that applies also beyond sex work, because this is a key issue for people who don't have documents, that they are obviously in much more unsafe space in general, because whatever happens to them, there's a barrier to report to the police. So this is something I think is really key to keep in mind, and that we also need to look at, because this just makes the city in general a more unsafe space for people without documents. And when it's related to sex work, the same applies. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Just a very tiny follow-up, because one of the points in the manifesto is also, if there's a raid, of course we would prefer as little as raids to be taken place, and of course we want homework to be legal, but if there's a raid and the police finds an undocumented sex worker, that they don't hand the information over to the IND, etc. Is that something that the city of Amsterdam can agree with the police force, that at least these undocumented sex workers do not need to be afraid of the Amsterdam police doing...
This is national law, so this you cannot. It's difficult, I think, to make local exceptions for this. But
so
I'm looking at my colleagues if they know. I actually don't know if this is possible to do on a local level. I'm not sure.
So maybe, because we were also struggling, of course, with this question, right? Because immigration is a national competency. We were writing recommendations for the city policy, but we felt that in the protocols of the Amsterdam police, there would maybe be space to have a discussion about this. But you were having, you know something about this? You can help us out?
When it comes to national law, I thought this was the municipality. So maybe I'm not going to say anything about this specifically, because I'm not sure if Leon says national law, I'm not sure. But one other point that I do want to make about safety, and that's apart from the situation that was just described, I think when we look at last year, I think what is most unsafe for a lot of sex workers when we look at the Wallen is the people outside street dealing that are making people feel uncomfortable when they're walking on the street, you know? And I think that is something that we can also need to think of and need to take into account, that it's like sometimes on the streets more unsafe when you go to see a sex worker at the Wallen. It's also very good that we're really aware of that, and that we secure safety on the streets there as well. And that's why we just raised, also from an initiative from you, from a debate that we had in City Council, we raised
the hours for the 72 hours.
And I'm looking for the word. The Dutch,
Gebiedsverbod.
Thank you, Al.
Restraining order.
Oh, thank you. That word. So we raised it just to secure the safety on the streets of the Wallen, because that is also the feeling of safety when you're walking around there. We are responsible for that as City Council as well.
I have a question there.
It was related to the connection between the red light district, the windows, and the erotic center, because at the last presentation of the erotic center that I went to, it was clear that there was a compartmentalization. So there's the ANPAC Centrum, which involves closing the windows and changing the red light to really reduce tourism and all this kind of stuff. And now the erotic center is its own project that's not related to that. And in the end, it's a question about access to workspaces. And I think that there's a huge risk that the cleaning up of the red light district will go ahead. It's possible that the erotic center might not go ahead or change or not happen in the way it is. And then we have this worst case scenario where we have even less workspaces. And the whole idea was to create more workspaces. So I think there needs to be a shift somehow to make this about creating workspaces so that there is a safety net, so we don't end up in worst case scenario, because the two projects are now disconnected. So if the erotic center fails, the Unpack Centrum will still go ahead. And so I think that this needs to be addressed somehow in how the city's doing it, because it needs to be about providing workspaces and not about providing two options, which, could really go bad. I think there's a huge risk there.
I think so. Yeah.
So I just wondered if you could talk, a question, like, how could we change this? Because it's it started as an idea where it was connected, but obviously in the process of making these things real, they become disconnected. And I think it's like, how can you still maintain, because I from what you said from the PvdA, that it's a trade-off, but in the reality of realizing the plans, we could end up with nothing. So if you made that trade-off, how can you, is there a way of actually guaranteeing that it was worth trading it off? That's what I think the question.
Yeah, well, we're both in the coalition, but so it's both of our parties that agreed to this plan. I think it's important to note that what we have now discussed in the plans and this erotic center, I mean, it will take probably about 10 years before it's actually built. So it's a long process. So it's not like we're shutting down windows tomorrow and then waiting to see if the erotic center is happening. So this is something that obviously will go hand in hand, and this is what we have committed ourselves to, and what the mayor, who is in charge of this, has also committed to. So not decreasing the total amount of workspaces. So I think since this is in the plans, this is also something that the city can be held accountable for. So this is,
So then I think it would be about making a kind of third way, which is dealing with creating new workspaces between now and the 10 years when the erotic center comes. That would be, to me, the way to resolve that.
Well, the love hotels are already in plans on looking at, because what I'm surprised about, opting in isn't in one of the, and that's a huge issue, because when it comes to making sure that you decide how many hours you work, that you decide what kind of activities you do, and also that you decide what your rate is almost impossible in some spaces. So we need different kind of workspaces so sex workers can decide for themselves on the working hours, on what they want to do, what they don't want to do, and what they want to charge for it. So this is already something that a municipality is looking towards, on making sure, for example, the love hotels, that sex workers can do their job more safely, and also to have more say in how they want to do their job. So this is already something that has been communicated. It's in the letter of the mayor a couple of months ago, where she also announced this, like, we're looking towards making sure that these spaces are created.
So there is an option that before the erotic center opens, that there's going to be new workspaces before that time?
Yeah,
or there will be space for this?
It has nothing to do with the erotic center, because it's mostly because, so we've had prostitution policy, that was the name, and it was very old. It doesn't apply to the current situation now. It doesn't take away what's going on now with sex workers, with online work. So we've had a discussion about this, and we've talked about several proposals to work on this. And one of the proposals was making sure that this work is happening, but we don't see it. We have no idea how many sex workers are currently active in Amsterdam, which is weird, to be honest, because how can we not know? And that means that the relationship between sex workers and government, we need to work on that. And that means for us to make sure that there are more safe spaces to do the work. And right now, it's almost impossible. So that's why we're looking into love hotels. But that is separate from what's going on right now in the red light district and the erotic center, because it's really about the hidden sex work that we don't. Yeah, we have no idea what's going on there, right there.
And maybe a hypothetical question, because in the coalition agreement, the erotic centers there's also the aanpak van de wallen, the idea of to reduce the amount of windows in the wallen. What happens if, for example, the erotic center cannot be built? because you cannot find an entrepreneur, you cannot find somebody to build it, or any kind of situation that might happen. What will then happen to the red light district? Do we have any ideas about that?
Well, we have always said if the erotic center is not built, we're not going to close.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And that's also in the coalition agreement.
Yeah.
So
that's
if it doesn't happen, then that's it. It's
No, like I said, it's conditional. So we need the erotic center to be able to do something in the red light district. So if there's no erotic center, then we can't change anything in the red light district. So.
Okay. Yeah. If we can give a mic. Yeah.
There was a mic. Hi, my name is Bloem and I'm from Utrecht. I am part of the sex worker klankbord group there. So I wanted to ask about the love hotel. I have two questions. One is about the love hotels. I know that in Utrecht we are now trying to finalize. It's a bit complicated, but we are making something like that as well, where sex workers can rent rooms and for part of the day and receive clients there. It was very hard for people to find a location for that because of the bestemmingsplan. Yes. And other regulations that are in place which make it very difficult. So now the municipality has found a location that is their own. So is that a possibility for Amsterdam as well to look at buildings that the municipality owns to put them in service for these kind of locations? That's the first question. Second question is, in Utrecht I always try to advocate also, if we talk about diversity of workspaces and work forms, I always try to advocate for the tippelzones, the street sex work locations, because they are one of the few or one of the only work forms in which people, especially from more marginalized parts of our community, can work safely. And a lot of people prefer that. In Utrecht, we had a tippelzone. It's closed down in 2021. The municipality, for now, doesn't want to open a new one, but we are still working on it. And what I've heard from the friends of me who used to work there is that it was a very tight and happy community. People felt really safe. They really preferred that kind of work. It was open for sex workers who are trans, who couldn't work in other spaces, for sex workers who are older, who are fat, so they might not be able to work in brothels, who have certain body types they need. It's also open for sex workers with addiction, who also cannot work in other spaces. So it's a really, and for certain types of sex workers with disabilities, it's not always good for all disabilities because of working outside and in the cold sometimes. But there's also ways to do this in a more cute way, because the tippelzone is also, a lot of people have this image of it. It looks dirty, it looks on the street. Like you can also do it in a garage, like it's in Arnhem, I believe. So yeah, please look into this as an option as well, because it provides direct access for marginalized sex workers to work without having to pay something upfront. So they don't have to rent a room first or a window or something. Yeah, those were my questions.
Two options, maybe one counselor for one option.
To start with your last part, the tippelzone. To be very honest with you, from the questions that I had with sex workers and people involved in the sex working industry, this isn't something that I've talked about before. So I'm just gonna take what you told me and I'm gonna research it and think about it, and also talk with more people in Amsterdam about it to see if this is something that they want. Because when we introduce something in our policy, it's based on what other people want in the industry. So thank you for your suggestion, and I will take it with me. About the first part, the love hotels, I think, from what I understood correctly, and the last conversation we had about that, it's something that Amsterdam is researching now. So it's something that the mayor also wants. And I think the exact way of doing it, she's going to come with a proposal, I think, right, on the love hotels. So that's going to come our way. I have no idea yet what it's going to look like. That's my honest answer to that. I don't know yet what it's going to look like, but this might be a possibility. I don't know if my colleague from GroenLinks has more information.
I'm very interested in the way that you want to organize this, because we've also talked about it in the municipality about self-organization of sex workers. Because what you're saying about brothels and about sex clubs is it's very much, you have to look this way, you can do this, you have to do this, and this is what you're getting paid, and you don't actually have a lot of say in this. And I think the self-organization of sex workers is very important, especially in this industry. So I'm very interested in how, because we don't really have that right now in Amsterdam, so I'm very interested in how that looks like for you. So I would like to learn more about it, because I think this could be very interesting and also provide more diverse and safe spaces for sex workers.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and I think I agree that it's also interesting what you're saying about the tippelzone. I have to be honest, I don't know about the history of the Amsterdam tippelzone. When did it close down? Do you know?
We have people in the room that know this a long time ago. Which year? 2003.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
It was closed down by the municipality as well, I think, right? Yeah.
But I think I saw in the programma of GroenLinks of the previous elections that reopening the tippelzone was in the program. So.
Listen, a lot of these things are already in our
What are you gonna?
I was like, I already did. I don't know.
But can I say something about the Love Hotel? Yeah, I love this idea of the self-organizing and looking at like the erotic center, and then you have to wait for a big investment company to actually realize it. It already scares me a little bit, because I hear people trying to make maximized profit off of other people. So the way to avoid that would be to self-organize and self-lead.
Well, we will not say no to that.
Lyle, I think we have time for one more question from the audience.
Yeah.
And then we will go downstairs for the ball.
Exactly.
Everybody's happy with that?
There we can have more questions. I saw back, there was a hand in the back of the room. It's going to be our last one for tonight.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of points and a question. Councillor, I find it a bit strange that you don't feel like this particular municipality could become a sanctuary city as far as the IND and not reporting, when every municipality is allowed to make their own regulations in regard to sex work. I can remember when there were windows all the way from the Gelderse Kade to just about to the Warmoestraat, and for sure there were not 1 million point something more people coming every year, but the tourism was not such an issue then as it is now. For sure, if you make more workspaces in the Wallen, there will be less of a tourist issue. My question is about the fact that sex workers are considered ccp'ers, but this is the only profession that is not overseen by the Ministry of Sociale Zaken en Werkgelegenheid, but by the Ministry of Justice. You all talk about safety and safety and safety, but I can't help but think that a profession that's the only profession that's overseen by the Ministry of Justice will automatically be made unsafe, because this is how people think of it. So what do any of you have to say about maybe changing it so that this is considered actual work, like all the other CCP professions?
Yeah.
Can I say, I think everybody in Amsterdam, or almost everybody in Amsterdam, at least in the coalition, agrees with you on this point. And this is something that I also know that we express also to our national government very often. But as you also know, our national government, well, I don't even want to finish this sentence, but we will get a new national government. So hopefully they will listen. But I fully agree with you, because this is something we also hear, for instance, with bank accounts, and that sex workers have difficulty opening bank accounts. And this also makes it more difficult, because then it's less transparent, the payments and everything there. And that also decreases the agency that you have over your own company. And even as the word ZZP'er says, it says zelfstandig. It means that you should have agency over what you're doing. So I fully agree with you there. And I think that agency aspect is something that's important, because that will also, give people more control over what they earn and how they earn it and how they are working. So fully agree with you there. I can only hope that the next national government will be more receptive when we voice these concerns to them, because this does happen from the city, I know.
Can I quickly add to that? That this, first of all, I completely agree, and I think all the parties that are sitting here agree when it comes to that. And it needs to be tackled nationally. I do think, besides like politics, this is also something that society needs to work on. It's not only politics, it's also companies. I think it was quite recent that the Rabobank is now changing something, right? They became more, they started working with sex workers as well. And I think that's one bank that is now, in that sense, changing their policies, which is like, it's 2025, like, come on, guys. But what I want to say is that this is something that's way bigger than only politics. And by speaking up about it, also from our side, from the national side, but also from the room, to make this a more known factor, because I think a lot of people are just not aware of the in that sense, like the discrimination that sex workers experience in general. So I see there a role for ourselves as politicians, but also a role for society as a whole.
And I think that's a beautiful comment to finish off our conversation. Thank you once again for coming all, and a big applause. Thank you. And
yay! You all got a coin, right? Remember, that's the coin for the drink. You can also get more drinks, but you don't have more coins.